Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. We have an exciting show tonight with a little different twist. We have a lawyer in the studio tonight that wants to talk about child abuse, family law, and sometimes that does intersect with the criminal justice system. So and I have my faithful co-host, Danny Sneed, that's here to give you his insight and intellect on the issue. So, all right, without further ado, let's go to Miss Victoria Broussard. Miss Victoria, tell us who you are, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Vivian, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
I'm Victoria Broussard, and I am the original alchemy attorney. I am a lawyer here in the Houston area. My office is in Katy, and I operate the Alchemy Attorneys LLC, as well as the Alchemy Attorneys Foundation, which is a 501c3 that feeds services back into the Alchemy Attorneys. And we are the law firm with a moral compass, and we want to raise your vibration during your litigation.
All right, I like it, I like it. So, but your area of concentration is what?
It's family law.
All right. So in family law, I know there's a lot of intersection with the criminal justice system. I know a lot of times in the criminal justice system, especially in nasty divorces, we always have situations where, you know, he touched the child, and it's hard to tell whether it happened or it didn't happen, you know, because a lot of times it only comes up when it comes up, you know, comes down to the actual divorce. So, but then a lot of times children are touched inappropriately by adults. And so talk to me about that. Talk to me about your background and your personal experiences that made child abuse and domestic relations important to you.
Sure. Yes, it is one of those topics where there's a lot of lines drawn for yes, it did, or no, it didn't happen, because we are dealing with the innocence of a child, and children always want to give. You know, that's been my experience, and even in my personal experience, in that same situation, you know, we're taught to love. We want to be loving. Children, I think, come here automatically just wanting to give love and receive love, and so there's a purity there. And that does frequently get taken advantage of by people who have ill motives toward that child, sexually or emotionally or what have you. So I think when it comes to my personal experience in the intersection between that and becoming a family law attorney, I had a situation where it was secreted for 10 years.
How old were you?
I was 4 years old at the first experience.
So from 4 to 14?
Correct.
Wow.
Yes.
By what? Who was the perpetrator?
Oh, there were many.
Okay.
It spanned across continents. My parents were retired Air Force, so once we left the United States, of course, it's one of those things. It's kind of like you get this red scarlet on your forehead to some degree with that activity, because I don't know if you know, perpetrators can sense that that child has been exposed in that way or what it is, but it's almost like it follows you. Once it happens and no one does anything about it, it just becomes a part of your experience in life. It becomes a part of your journey. And so
at 4, how do you remember what happened at 4?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, how do you
Let
remember?
me sit up a little closer.
Yeah, no. Okay, so the question is, how do you remember what happened to you at 4 years old?
Because I was raped, and that's not something that you easily forget, no matter how old you are.
Like raped with someone's genitals, or digitally with fingers?
Yes.
Or?
The first experience I had was a penetration of a penis.
In a 4-year-old?
In my vagina, correct.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
And what I remember even more than that was when I went home to tell my grandmother about it. You know, my grandmother was an alcoholic, and so I was down the street a lot, and so that's where this occurred.
So it was like a neighborhood person?
Correct, correct.
Like a teenage boy or a grown man?
He was a teenager,
okay.
Yeah, at the time. So when I went home, obviously I was in pain, and so I told my grandmother, you know, this happened to me, and it was evidence, it was clear what happened. And her being in the state of mind that she was in, which goes to the point that you were making earlier about how does this happen, is a lot of our mental states in our communities are so degenerate that things do not get addressed. In our culture, to your point earlier, which we'll talk about again, I'm sure, is things are easily swept under the rug because we didn't have the language. We didn't have the emotional stability. We didn't have the wherewithal to deal with situations like this that were so painful and so traumatic for everyone involved. And our communities were close-knit, like you were saying, and so no one wanted to harm anybody. And we're generally a loving people, so there's a lot at play here when you're dealing with these circumstances. So my grandmother put me on the bathroom floor and put some Vaseline between my legs, and that was that. And so at that point, I learned a very interesting lesson about my life.
The value of it.
Exactly, the value of my life at that point. And I kept thinking, someone's going to get in trouble. I know that the hammer's coming. You know, I was a very, like I told you earlier, I was a very intuitive child, and I knew that this was wrong and that there was evidence and that something should be done and that someone was going to get in trouble. So day after day after day, nothing happens. And I'm learning, okay, so number one, this happens, and number two, you don't tell, because now I feel even worse. Because now I feel like I've done something wrong because no one got in trouble for hurting me. So you're constantly devalued. You're constantly working against this thought in your mind that no one values me. And so this keeps happening. And then you're in a cycle. And so that's what happened for 10 years with lots of people.
So what city were you living in at 4 years old?
I was in Port Arthur, Texas, where I'm from.
Okay. So where were your parents?
My mom had joined the military, so I was staying with my grandmother. My mom had me when she was 15 years old. So in order to provide, obviously, she had to do what she had to do, and so she joined the military at 17 and retired from the Air Force at 37. She was in San Antonio at the time in basic training, and I was living with my grandparents who, as I stated, my grandmother was an alcoholic.
Okay. So from there, so when you say that it happened over and over again for 10 years, was it the same boy down the street or was it other boys in the neighborhood? Because boys do talk. So, I mean, was it boys in the neighborhood or how did it occur again?
No, well,
like if you can recall the second or third time.
Yeah, I can. So after that, my mom got remarried. My dad and her remarried for a short period of time, and then they got divorced, and then she got remarried in San Antonio. And when she got remarried, the man that she married was much older than her, and he began to sexually abuse me, and I had like 5 years of experiences with him until she divorced him.
Now, where would your mother be?
She would go to work, and he was...
Well, why wasn't he at work?
I know, right?
I'm just trying to understand.
I know. Well, he was much older, so he had a different kind of experience with his job. He worked from home. He was a professor, so he could come and go kind of when he pleased. So I was at home with him a lot. And then...
So from 5 years old to what?
We left when I was about 9. We moved to Spain when I was 9.
So your grandmother was alcoholic. You couldn't really trust her protecting you, but what about your mom? Did you tell your mother? Were you able to?
Yeah, no, I didn't tell my mom until I wrote my book.
I see.
I secreted these things all my life until I turned 42 years old.
I would like to add this, Vivian, and I often hear you ask this question, and to me, like, why, how is like never an answer to the why and the how of someone's lived experience.
No.
Because, you hear it and you're listening to it. It's surreal. You're looking at the person, they're healthy, and we're talking about a time that's past but was real. But when you hear it, it's almost like is happening now.
Certainly, certainly.
And I'm not the victim. So I just want you to know that I hope you're okay. And that I'm sharing that because the courage to even talk about it to me is like, I'm sitting here saying, for you to be able to tell us about something that's like a horror movie. And
well, the good news is, I believe that she wrote a book and has used her horrible experience in a therapeutic way by, first of all, not having the courage to write a book and tell the story, and then to be able to share it with people. And sometimes our work as lawyers is to help people. You know, my work as a lawyer was to help people. And so sometimes doing that helps you help other people that are going through the same situation that you're going through or that you went through, and it makes your work have meaning, not just for the money of it. People look at females and say, oh, you're a lawyer, you have money. Well, some of us are poor lawyers because we're really doing it for the cause. All of us are not doing it for the money. Yeah. I mean, you need to have enough money to survive, and some of us are smart enough to be wealthy lawyers. You know, I could have been a corporate lawyer since I'd been a banker for 10 years, but I got into criminal law and tried to help people that were in situations that I was in. So I respect that, but when people hear these stories, if you can say what you can say and what you can't say, don't say. But I know when people are listening, they want to know those things. And so obviously as an interviewer, I have to kind of delve as deeply as you'd allow me to. So I am, and I want people to understand as we share our stories that if they see a sign that a child is hurt, not to cover it up, but to go talk about it. And when you hear someone's pain, then maybe that'll give a mother or an aunt or a grandmother the courage to go to the authorities, the courage to get counseling for a child, because people don't know what to do. We're equipped for a lot of things in life, but we're not equipped to deal with this type of trauma. Nobody's equipped. I wouldn't know what to do if my daughter told me that, but you know, I'm empathetic enough and been through enough of my own pain to know that I got to seek help from somebody. You know, what do I do in a situation like this? Besides just wanting to kill a MF, what do I do? So thank you for sharing.
So, right, no mother should find out that their daughter was sexually assaulted from a book. That was my point. You know what I'm saying?
But sometimes as a child, you're afraid. Like if the first person didn't do anything, that can create fear. You know, like you said, as a child, when bad things happen, you think it's your fault.
Absolutely.
And so you don't know what to do. So anyway, let's let our guest talk.
Okay.
So Victoria, if you can get us back into that mood and mindset of, you know, this older stepfather that you have, and I mean, was he sexually assaulting you in the same manner?
No, so
some people do it differently.
Correct, absolutely. To that point, you're absolutely right. So after the first experience, then with my stepfather, the experiences weren't penetration. They were just fondling and touching and things of that nature. And the complicated, and if I may address one of your points just for clarity. So when I decided that I wanted to write I Comfortable Victim, because that was going to be the beginning of my healing. That was going to be where I started trying to unravel all of these things that had occurred, and then the decades of secreting it. I did tell my mom. I slowly unveiled all of the incidences that had occurred over that 10-year period, little by little, in bites that I hoped that she could digest, because my greatest fear was losing her. So when you ask about that, you know, I knew my mom would go crazy. And I knew that I had already was gonna have to deal with how to fix myself, how to repair myself in this space. The last thing I needed was to have to repair losing her.
Oh, wow.
Because I knew I couldn't do that. I couldn't do both of those. You know what I mean?
Change.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I had to pick, you know, which one
you
do I
gotta
use.
save yourself.
Yeah, you close one wound and open up another one.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. So I never told my mom until I felt an inkling that she could deal with it.
But from 5 to 9, and she's with this man. Are you acting funny towards him? I mean, like, is she getting any hints? I mean, I'm just trying to understand the dynamic.
I know. I did too for many years, and this is what was uncovered. Because she was 15 when she had me, there was arrested development there. And so in all these we do things, and we have cellular memory, then we have environmental memory, we have emotional memory. So in her experience, that arrested development of being abused as a child by my grandmother, who was alcoholic, who beat her, and then having me at 15, having this huge responsibility, going into the military. She was sexually assaulted in the military. So then you have this compound effect that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you have a person who is not able to really see what's happening. Now, when I wrote the book, I did a lot of marketing and stuff like that. But she was with me. And so there was this one time when the interviewer asked my mom, you guys aren't going to believe this. I'll never forget it, because I just literally almost just stopped. And I was like, this interview has to be over, because I just am learning this information right now in this interview with my mom. And that's how deep it goes. So the interviewer asked her the same question that you just asked me, Vivian. Were there any signs with my stepfather, since that was the closest quartered relationship where she was right there? My mom says, well, there was this one night, and of course my mom was only 20 at this time.
Right.
You know, right. 20, 22 maybe.
Right.
There was this one time when we were tucking Victoria in, and she went to French kiss her dad. And I said, that sure would have been nice to know before this interview. In my mind, this is what I'm thinking as my mom is saying this. I'm like, are you kidding me right now, Mom?
So this professor had conditioned. See, this is the problem with it. It conditions a child to do these things.
Because he had make it normal.
Yeah, you make it normal. So like instead of a hug, he's French kissing her, so when she French kisses him back, because that's what he taught her to do.
Yeah.
Right.
But then my mom, this is what my mom's thinking in her mind. That's what we really got to get down to the brass tacks of why do we think the thoughts that we think.
And what was she thinking?
She said, this is what she said. Well, we're from Louisiana, you know, and we all really just kind of touchy-feely, and you know.
Not a child French kissing a grown man.
I know, that's what my thought is too. But in her mind, she's thinking, but you want to deny these things.
Yes. You don't want to see it. You don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, you got to make it. You got to make it something that you can handle.
Right. You have to mentally adapt to what you're seeing. So that was the sign. That was her one sign. Did she have more signs?
That was the one that she was able to. Well, I was a bedwetter, but and that's one of the signs.
One of the signs, yeah.
Is bedwetting. But then we moved around so much. You know, we moved every 3 years.
But why did she ever tell you why she quit the man?
Oh yeah, he was cheating. I mean,
oh, more than just with you.
Yes.
Not just with his daughter, with everybody, with his stepdaughter, but with other people.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Yeah. She didn't do that.
You know what? I must say this though. He has passed on, and he did ask my forgiveness.
Really?
Before he passed, he did.
Really?
Yeah.
In private?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And you know what's even more interesting, and I've run the gamut of my whole being as it relates to how this affected me in every step of the way, and how this fell into that, and how this created this actual characteristic. I was only 18 when he came to me and he asked me for forgiveness. I had just come back to Texas to go to school at the University of Texas, and he found out that we were back in Texas. And actually he was living here in Houston at the time. And he asked me to meet with him. And of course, I hadn't seen him since they had divorced. And me being conditioned still, like you were saying, my thought was, oh, he wants to be with me now that I'm grown, I'm an adult now, he wants to experience me in a different way. And that's how sick this whole
Well, because that creates a dynamic in you. It's not your fault, it's what, I mean, it creates prostitutes and girls. I mean, it creates This is the way you have a male-female relationship, because you've been conditioned as a child to give of yourself in that way. It's a secret, but then it's not a secret. It's y'all's secret. It becomes a way you love somebody. So it's confusing.
You are so right. You're absolutely correct. So when we met,
Been there, done that, could write my book. But anyway,
I know, right? And most women can. You know, most of us can write that book 10 times over. So when we met, I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna get a room, blah blah blah. And he's like, no, let's go to a park. I wanna be with you in public. And I'm just thinking, well, he's acting really weird because I hadn't seen him in a long time. So he changed, I changed. There was a lot of changes. And he apologized. And he said he got help. He said, I got some help. And you guys, when I tell y'all at 18, I didn't know what the heck
he was talking about.
Right.
I'm thinking he has lost his ever-loving mind at this point. Why are you talking to me like this about, there's nothing wrong with me. I did my whole superwoman thing.
Right,
you know?
right.
I'm fine, okay?
Right.
Maybe something's wrong with you.
Right.
I didn't understand what he was saying.
So it took some years to get there.
It took a long time.
At least he apologized and put something good in your spirit, since he had put some bad things in your spirit.
Absolutely.
What kind of state is it to be in to be a victim and not know you're a victim?
They don't know. Children.
No, I'm just saying for all of us.
Yeah, for all
to be a victim and not aware you're a victim. Because when you said you snapped at him and all that, like, why are you talking to me like what do I gotta forgive you for? You didn't do nothing to me.
This is our relationship.
Like, I wasn't harmed in that situation.
Right.
That's why I named the book I, Comfortable Victim. Because that is what those 10 years created, a comfortable victim.
So from 4 to 9, so let's go past 9, what happened?
So now, well, I had to add in his son, so he had a son.
They live with y'all?
Yeah. So then we move over to Spain, and now it's just me and my mom because she divorced him, obviously, and it's just her and I in Spain. So we get on a plane, and we're on a plane for 14 hours. I'm 9 years old. And we land, and I'm like, wow, we are really far from Port Arthur. We are very far from home.
Right.
So, of course, my mom's working a lot, and she ends up, I end up staying with friends, people. And then I get molested by a young woman. So that was that. She was the daughter of the people who I was living with. Who I was staying with after school, like when my mom would have to work late. And then there was a couple of people who Mom had befriended in Spain who were doing different work for her. I remember one time she wanted these paintings. We had pictures of my grandparents and me and her and just myself, and she wanted those pictures actually turned into portraits. And to this day, every time we still have them, obviously, they're cherished heirlooms because they were oil paintings. This man, a Spaniard in Spain, hand painted them. Well, when he came to pick up the money one time, it's interesting because I don't know if I've ever really told this story. I've never told this one.
It's not in the book?
No, I don't think this one is in the book, actually. I had so many of them. This was one that didn't make the book.
This is what we call a repressed memory.
Yes, and it'll be in book number 2.
This one didn't make the book.
It'll be in book 2,
How
or the next edition. Sometimes you make a next edition and you add things to
right.
it.
That's interesting. So my mom wasn't feeling well that day, and she said, "Can you go and give?" And his name was Antonio. Go and give Antonio, because on the painting, his name is written there. I see it all the time when I look at those 3 paintings that he painted for us. She said, go and give Antonio the money for the paintings. And so I go and I give Antonio the money, and Antonio is like, here, come and sit on my lap. And I'm thinking, oh God, not again. You know what I'm saying? By this point, y'all, really, I was like, okay, what is it? This is my life. This is just what happens to me. What am I supposed to do? This keeps happening over and over. So I sit on his lap, and he's like fondling me. And my mom, I guess she had some thought in her mind or some sense that something was wrong, or maybe it had gotten real quiet, I don't know, but she came out there and she was like, "No, get out of here," and she threw him out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, that was nice. But I could have said something then, but I think the shame, and I think you kind of spoke to this a little bit, Vivian, there was so many experiences and so much had happened with people who were close to us that we trusted and loved. And I just couldn't tell my mom everything. I just was so afraid that she would not love me or think that I didn't want to be with her, or I don't know, you know, you don't know what you're thinking as a child. You just know that I can't do it. All you know is I just can't tell. Mm-hmm. And I never told. I never told.
So what brings you to, how does these experiences affect the work that you do with children and abused children? Can we speak to that a bit?
Oh, sure. So, you know, family law has always been a soft space for me because in our families we have all of these different dynamics, and the family is the bedrock. It's the core of your first experiences as a person. That's where you start to learn to give and to share and care and love. And that nucleus means everything. It's the start. It's the start of who you become. So in family law, I've used these experiences to really craft a specialized, caring, intuitive, client-centered experience for my family law clients. And I really always have the child's best interest in mind. Even when my clients are like, this is what I want for my child, there's always this part of me that is asking for what's best for that child, not just what my client wants. If what my client wants is in the best interest of the child, then that's what I want to happen. But my heart is always for the child, as a result of what I experienced.
So one of the questions we have is how to dispel myths of childhood abuse and domestic violence. The myths. How do we dispel the myths?
We have to have open, continual, and non-judgmental conversations about this topic. And everything has to be on the table. Right. You know, that's the only way to dispel the myths, is the person who has the experience has to feel safe in saying, look, this is what happened. But in order to be safe, you first have to go inward for the healing. A lot of times the myths are all there because we want something outside of us to heal us. We want another person, or we want a therapy, or we want a book, or we want a love relationship or money, whatever you think that thing is that'll fill that void. You want that to heal you.
I would like to know, what are some of the myths? I mean, because this is a lot of first-time experience hearing some of this. Can we talk about some of the myths that are out there?
Sure. I think one of the biggest ones is, you know, it only happens to girls. That's a huge myth.
Right, because it does happen to little boys.
It happens to boys.
And another myth is that it didn't happen. You know, when a child says it happens, it's like, oh, they're just exaggerating and making things up, or they just want attention. That's a myth. It's a myth that, one of the biggest ones is that it didn't happen. If a girl says it, then they say it didn't happen. The denial part of it that a family member does, which creates a lot of shame in a child.
Is it in demographics in the myth that it happens more often with this group of people than this group of people?
In criminal law, you do see that. It's not a perfect thing to say, and I hate saying it, but you do see it in the Hispanic community a lot, from people from other cultures, not Mexico necessarily. It could be, you know, Guatemala or different, there are different cultural things that we see. I mean, there's something tragic going on in the news now where an 11-year-old girl was raped by a neighbor, and killed and stuffed under a bed. And it just started with her calling her dad, saying, you know, saying something happened, someone's at the door, and it turned into something horrible. I don't know if that was cultural, you know, based on who did it, but it was definitely somebody from the same country, Hispanic country. So things like that happen. So, but sometimes it's a myth that it only happens in the Hispanic community, because it happens in the Black community, it happens in the white community, it happens in all communities. And I don't think people really understand it. I mean, I don't understand it. But I've been told, since we have to deal with child pornography in the DA's office and child sexual assault, that there are some people, mostly men, who are sexually aroused by children. I've had someone explain that to me that's into the deep psychology of it. And for that, you have to create, for that person that has that sexual arousal, they have to get the proper therapy that will help them rearrange their thinking and accept who they are and rearrange their thinking. But there are some people that's what I was told.
So is this a fact or a myth that in all instances of sexual assault, the offender is dealing with some type of mental character defect that allows him to do it versus it's a criminal act?
I can't say that, but it's a selfish act. You know, they say that if an adult rapes an adult, it's anger, but you don't necessarily know that when it's a child. I mean, children are tender. I mean, they're loving, they're sweet. They're not sexual. You know, I mean, children are just sweet. Their bodies don't react in a sexual way. A small girl is not going to be lubricated for the introduction of sex.
Right.
Those glands have not developed in that way.
Right.
So if someone does that, that is I mean, you know that you're going to hurt this child for the rest of her life. So to me, and I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a deep thinker, it's a selfish act, because you are not doing anything that is going to bring pleasure to this child. This child is going to be crying. This child is going to be upset. This child is going to be trying to get away from you. So and their body is not responding properly until they're conditioned. And that's why a lot of children are conditioned first. Most abusers don't just go in and just start sexing a child. They first give them candy. They first let them sit in their lap. They start letting them feel an erection. They play with them in sexual ways until it happens. You know, it happens, but they slowly, it's called grooming, I guess, in the professional world. It's a horrible situation, but to me it's a selfish act, because you know you're ruining that child, and that child is not having any pleasure in that. But let's talk about some of the myths that you said generationally. Before we got on camera, you started talking about girls that you've talked to. So why don't you tell us that story?
So growing up in I would say from 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, when you just have girlfriends at school and you write the letters and you fold them and put the little pull thing on them, they put them in your locker. So I had these group of girls that I would have like 5 or 6 letters in my locker. And for me,
so they girlfriends are liked your girlfriends, or friend girls?
Well, you know,
if they put letters in, yeah, but it's kids,
you know, but we
crushes,
right? And they would have 3, 4 pages. Like my partners, they would get the same thing, but they would never respond.
Oh.
And sometimes I don't even know if they read theirs. But me, I would read them and I would respond. And I would fold mine and put the little pull.
And put it in their locker.
Everybody that wrote me, I wrote them back. Mm. And
player? You was a player as a young man.
I don't know what was going on. No, it's just what was going on. That's just how I interacted with it.
You like to communicate.
That stimulus from communicating and talking, I picked up on that early. Mm-hmm. But then here comes the telephone. So when you go home, now they call you on the phone. And so from these conversations, you can't just talk about, you eventually start talking about your brother, your cousin, all this. But over the years, more and more, I would say 3 out of 5, or maybe 2 out of 5 of these relationships would share experiences of them being sexually assaulted by someone in their family, whether it was a brother, uncle, cousin, and hold on to this one, ministers.
Ooh.
And here I am, just a little young boy on the phone. Man, I'm not gonna let I feel my mama like Godzilla, and I'm not finna share anything with her like you don't tell them things that are bad, it may fall back on me. It may backfire on me. So I'm getting this information, they're sharing it with me. They may be even crying on the phone. And I don't have the tools to tell them,
Right.
It's gonna be all right, don't cry. I'm like, I can't really comprehend what you saying they doing to you, because I ain't did none of that stuff yet. So the sexual experience there, I'm like,
you're fascinated by it, right?
Well, no, I'm not fascinated. I'm still in the cartoons.
Right,
you know what I'm
right,
saying?
right,
I play
right.
sports and stuff, and I'm like, this is
Too deep.
Yeah, I hold hands and I hold hands and
But
I
you're
may
not there
kiss you
yet.
on the jaw.
Right,
But
right.
the stuff you're describing, I ain't ready yet.
Right.
And
So they were having real sexual experiences.
well, I don't think anybody ever just said they were raped except one person. But it's like once they shared it, we started talking about something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't keep talking about it every time we talked. I didn't know what to do with the information. They didn't know what to do with the information. But as I got older and older and older, and we're not children anymore, and I start seeing them at class reunions and different things, I will remember these childhood stories that they shared with me, things that happened to them when they were young. And as I had my own experiences, I learned that look how life, we don't get a chance to pick what happened to us when we were children, but we have to try to adapt as adults through that experience, and sometimes that shape or reshape how our lives end up turning out. And until we reach that point where someone helps us and understand, hey, like a therapist did me, they had to sit me down and take me back to where I was 5 and 6 and talk about what happened to me from 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and saying, this explains your behavior as an adult. And the first thing I did is ran back and told my mama, it's your fault. I know what's wrong with me now.
You weren't accepting responsibility.
Well, no, because I'm going through substance abuse. I'm going through all this stuff in life. And in my 26 years old, I'm sitting in front of a therapist. She's taking me through 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that happened to you? Like, yeah, that happened to me. Well, that's your problem. Like, really? It's my mama's fault? Oh, I can't wait till I talk to her. Yeah, I'm drinking, I'm doing this, and I'm going to all this trouble, but it's your fault, what you did.
That's what you got out of the therapy? I hope you kept going.
Well, the therapist,
Because you just getting started.
I needed somebody to blame.
Yes.
To understand, how did I go from here to all this drama in my life? And she gave me someone to blame.
And what was your mom's reaction?
I can't remember specifically, but she was a very fanatical Christian. So she probably put the Bible on me. She probably did this. Get away from me, Satan, get thee behind me. She probably put the cross on me.
So how many years later did you accept responsibility for your own actions?
When I was turned 38.
Okay.
It didn't, but through therapy.
That's 12 years.
Through tools and giving me, they explained, they laid it out, that you may have been a victim, but you can't rationalize and justify that experience to where you are now. You got to make a decision that happened to you. And then the people that were around you in your life, they had some dynamics going on in their life. Mm-hmm. And so it made me look outside of me and look at the world in a bigger view, like, shoot, we all going through some stuff. That's a single parent raising 3 kids. But I put this expectation on my mom, you gotta have your stuff together. You can't miss on nothing. And I just tell my mom, you better be glad they didn't have CPS when I was growing up.
I ain't talking to you no more today. Be quiet. Let's move on to Miss Becky. Let's get back to Victoria, because I know you don't
know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying?
Get out of here. Get out of here.
I would have called the police on you.
Get out of here. Get out of here. I know. Get out of here with that. All right, let's get on to this conversation. So let's get more serious. How do you think parents that might be listening to this can identify if their child could be a victim of sexual assault?
Yes, the one that I had that was most prevalent was the bedwetting.
Yes.
And
There's going to be some psychological issue with bedwetting. It could be
right,
sexual assault. It could be, it's trauma.
right.
It's shown that there's some trauma.
Exactly. I mean, if nothing's wrong physiologically, then there's something else going on that's in the head. And just departures from behavior that you know the child enjoys or has enjoyed in the past, and now all of a sudden they don't want to do that anymore, or a departure in the other direction, something that they just want to all of a sudden do that they've never done before. Because
So a lot of people say like acting out, but did you ever experience withdrawing? You know, say for example, when you're a little kid, not wanting to play down the street anymore or wanting to stay in my room more. I know it was a different time back then. We played in the street more than kids do now. But, I mean, I don't know if you can look at yourself to see if you changed your behavior.
no, I think the one that was most prevalent for me was the bedwetting, because it was psychologically at night was when my body was at rest and my mind was at rest. That was how I was relieving that stress, because there was a lot of stress on my body as well as my mind during that 10 years, because I was like, oh my goodness, how do I continue to deal with my mom? I mean, literally in that situation with my stepdad, my mom would go to work and I would go into the bed with him. And so psychologically, that messed with me, you know. I mean, this is my mom's husband, and this is, I don't even understand why this is happening, you know.
But you know that that's a part of the routine.
It's a part of the
You
routine.
were groomed. He groomed you.
Yeah, for
do
sure.
that. Right,
Most definitely.
Were you able to seek any counseling, or did you counsel yourself through therapy? How did you get to this self-actualization that you're in now?
Yes, ma'am. Well, writing I Comfortable Victim was the start, and then helping other survivors really made a difference. After I wrote my book, and people would call and they would say, I hadn't told either, and I'm 60 years old, and reading your book, you know, changed everything for me. I was able to see myself in a way that I had never seen myself before. So like you had said when we first started the segment, that being able to make a difference in that space opened up my ability to start to really heal. And then after the book in 2019, I started to do some very intense therapy, and I did it with my mom, actually. So I was ready to take my healing to the next level, and so in 2019 we started doing therapy.
So would you do it, you talk to the therapist by yourself, then your mom, and then y'all do it together, or how did y'all work the scheduling?
Yes, that's exactly right, and I also included my son, because evidently, you know, raising him with all of these things in my head, you know, there was some residual effects, and so it was 3 generations, my mom, myself, and my 28-year-old son. He's 28 now. I wanted to bring him into the counseling as well, because I knew that there was going to be issues that he needed to deal with, because he saw me acting out as an adult, you know, in different experiences, in different relationships. You know, I had the challenges, you know, obviously. So we all did therapy together, and then all 3 of us did therapy separately. And now we're all, you know, in a much better space. We all understand how it happened. We understand how we contributed to the healing of the whole
That's wonderful.
thing, the whole
That's
journey.
wonderful. Did it help you with your behavior towards men? Because some women who've gone through a lot of things like that hate men, or have issues with men, or are too promiscuous with men. And I'm not asking you to say those things, but I'm just saying, did it, whatever way you learned to protect yourself with men, did the therapy help you heal and help you self-analyze and try to work on different behavior?
Without question. I was able to really see my pattern and see the cycles that I had gone in. And I'm 52 now. I'll be 53 in December.
Wow, look at you, girl.
Yeah.
You're beautiful. You don't look that. I didn't know how old you are.
Thank
I would have never thought so. Would you?
No.
Never, ever, ever, ever. 52.
This is all real.
That does look real, but you know that could happen at 28.
That's true.
So
True
you know,
that, yeah. No, I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
You got great
I'm
skin. You
very
look great.
grateful.
You know, one of the things in therapy we talk about is triggers. And what triggers are, and not to try to tell your story is, because a trauma is trauma.
Yes.
You just put trauma up there.
Right.
And what happens is, what triggers the trauma?
Right.
You know, and when you was thinking about talking about relationships, everything could be going good. This person just doing their thing. They say something or do something, and that's a trigger.
Right.
And you react not in a way that's taking you back to a prior experience. And they like, whoa.
Whoa, I know. Where did all this come from?
Yeah, you know, like, wow. It can, and that's the interaction with the children or with people, co-workers, anywhere in my environment. What I learned most about therapy is being aware that your environment can bring on triggers that bring you back to an old experience, and you start reacting like you're there. Like, I didn't defend myself back there.
But I'm going to do it now. So
but
now
now-
you over-defend yourself.
Yeah, right. You overcompensate.
Absolutely.
But it's all subconscious. But that's what I like about the dynamics of therapy. Man, they walk you through all that.
Right, right.
So now you walk out of therapy with some confidence, like, I got some tools now
Right.
when I go out in the world and interacting with people.
Right.
They don't have to know my experience. I just need to know.
Right, right.
They don't need to know my triggers.
Right.
I need to know my triggers.
Yeah, so we need to know as individuals how to pull those tools out that we've learned when we get those triggers. It's our experience. And I think one of the things everybody expects it, you know, to blame people, or it's your fault, or I need you to help me. You know, the hardest part to me is that you got to help yourself. You know, you can't rely on other people. You can't make it somebody else's problem. You can't depend on other people, really. You know, if you can find someone you can depend on, that's great, but you can't expect that other person to help pull you out of this psychological warfare that you're going through. Well, we don't have many minutes left, but I do want to ask one more question that you do in your work. And what type of parental conversations would you suggest parents have with their children about sexual assault and abuse, and to how to avoid those situations?
Right. One of the things I think is important is to make the distinction that it does happen more frequently to women and girls. And I think the reason is because our society teaches girls to be more acquiescent, to be more forgiving, meaning I'm forgiving of myself to you in all of these ways because, number one, we're primarily the caregivers or the nurturers or the cultivators. And so I think that with girls, we need to start young with them and letting them know that their voice is powerful, that they don't have to constantly shriek back and allow things to just happen to them. Because I think with one of the things that I always felt was that, you know, you got to people need to be able to just move a girl around, and the girl doesn't have as much power as a boy does in our society. I think that we need to give more credence to our young girls, and really mothers and fathers, particularly with fathers and daughters have such a special and beautiful relationship, and I think that that conversation needs to be really cultivated, and a young daughter needs to know from her father that you speak up. You don't ever have to be in a corner. You don't ever have to let anybody have their way with you. You know, I think just empowering our children, period, is one of the things that's most important, and also to let children know that it's never their fault. Right. And that's one of the other myths that I just wanted to dispel, is that it's never the child's fault, no matter what, no matter how groomed you've been. There was one thing that I used to say when I wrote my book, and I love this phrase, and it's shameful and blameful to blissful and gainful. because the shame and the blame of these experiences, it tries to attach itself to you forever. But you got to learn how to be blissful and gainful. You got to let that shame go and let that judgment upon self. We heap judgment on ourselves for so many different things. I think one of the other conversations is about forgiveness and forgiving yourself, because the child feels like no matter what, I did something wrong.
Right.
Because our society is always telling kids, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. We don't know how to raise children in this society.
Right.
We have messed children up to some degree that is almost irreparable. We have to empower. Children are powerful.
And children can think that they're bad. You know what I mean? I'm just bad, you know, because it's just in me. I'm bad. It happens to me over and over, and I'm just bad, and I'll accept that. So I do agree with that. We definitely have to tell our children. One of the things I tried to do, I became a single mother when my daughter was 3, and she's also 28, is never leave her alone, or leave her alone with people that I didn't think would
You read my mind.
sexually assault her. It could have happened to her. I never saw any signs. And maybe that's a conversation I'll hear someday. But as a single mother, you have to leave them places. So I tried to always make sure, you know, I had somebody with her that I could trust, or I thought I trusted. The problem is a lot of times it's
those
those
very
ones that
people.
you think you
it's the trusted ones. I know. So
people.
as I say this, that's why I'm giving the caveat. 'Cause I might have screwed up, and there might be a conversation I gotta have.
I see my mind working like, I thought there was some people that do
Did I do it? I tried. I
did my best.
I did my best. I mean, that's all I could do. I paid people that I interviewed and thought could do it, even if they were college students, to pick her up from elementary school, stay there and do homework with her, that she wasn't alone. She was latchkey, but not like by herself, to run and have anybody at the house. And I tried really hard not to have men around her. You know, I tried to date when she wasn't there, when she was with her father. She had a very active father. So I went many years without dating, from like 9 to 18, because I didn't want men around her. I was afraid. And dealing in criminal law, you see the worst of people. You know, and sometimes when a girl, when the mother likes a man, say she's in love with him, and that girl sees that, some girls emulate that. And some men feel like the girl's coming on to them. And maybe they are, just because they're emulating the love that the mother is giving. You see what I'm saying?
She see what you're doing, I'm going to do what mom do.
Right, and that leads to a sexual relationship with the man when mama's not there. But the girl is but that's where you have to have a man that's saying, look, this is, you know,
Inappropriate.
it's inappropriate. Move over here, sweetheart. You're beautiful, you know, and blah blah blah. But some men feel weak with that, especially if they're drinking men or dope smoking men or things like that. You know, and you can have a little girl that sits in your lap, and then when she gets older, she's still sitting in your lap. Things happen. So you know, the men have to accept responsibility, because sometimes I've read a lot of police reports where the men say the girl came on to them. And that might have happened, but that doesn't mean she's a whore, she's bad, she's emulating the behavior, or she's been conditioned or raped, or you don't know what has gone on with her. So she's just emulating what she's seen. And so you don't know. So that's why I didn't want men around her, because I didn't want to show a man affection, and that one time that she might try to emulate what I'm doing. And then then I go in the other room. Things happen when you just go in the other room.
Oh, you could see that deep because you were in criminal law.
I read police reports.
Oh, yeah.
I've had clients, you know, doing court appointments that do all kind of crazy stuff to kids. So, I mean, and kids who've done things, kids who have grown up in that environment, and then they grow up. I've had people who grow up and the woman rapes boys of her boyfriend. You know, so people can get messed up in very bad ways. So you see this bad thing she's doing, but you don't know why. I've had clients that are in prison right now, one client for child pornography, but he was taught that by one of the mama's boyfriends, watching child pornography when he was 5 and 6. So when he grew up, he was still watching it. The feds picked him up. He's in prison now. Was a great guy, but he was just doing what was emulated to him, and there was no psychology in it. So it's a lot of things that people do.
Can I add one more layer?
Yeah, we got 2 minutes.
So now in society, we no longer can hide the people that commit these crimes in the closets when they come out of prison. And what is happening is, I work in a profession where you have to deal with these people in a human way. And when they tell you that I'm a sex offender, I have got rid of my biases, and it's not as shocking anymore, and I couldn't be, because they're back in society and they got to get back in the game.
Right.
And we have to make a place for them, and it's getting harder and harder, but that is expanding, and it's difficult, especially if you find out the details of what the sex offense was, and the person. You don't want to challenge them. You just want to help them with any resources that they would need if they didn't have any kind of offense. And so I just want to say that it's tough, but we're forced to make room for them back in society after they commit these heinous crimes.
All right. Well,
for housing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you work with veterans, and we appreciate you working with veterans.
Well, not just veterans.
Since you're a veteran yourself.
Not just veterans, but men and women getting out with these type of cases are difficult to work with.
You're right. They're difficult.
Because there's a stain on them. You know, there's a stain. Society looks at them as, you know, discardable, but they're still human.
Well, you got 1 minute, Miss Victoria Broussard. You've been a lovely guest, sharing a lovely story that I think is important to people, but I want you to try to think of some closing remarks, please.
Yes, and I think that that's a perfect place to close with regard to rehabilitation.
Yes.
Because we all deserve rehabilitation, and we all need it in order to elevate our consciousness and to elevate the consciousness of the world. We need to rehabilitate ourselves in places that we don't even know requires rehabilitation. And there has to be a place for everyone in society. And one of the things that I had thought about was putting together the survivors with the offenders, putting like a group together where I could share my story to an offender, and then hear his story, going back, like you said, to his childhood or things that occurred to him, so we can all share. And that's where the open, non-judgmental, and continual dialogue is, and that's where healing is.
All right. Well, that's a great way to wrap up this segment. I hope that you enjoyed this segment of Truth and Justice with Vivian King, with our wonderful guest, Attorney Victoria Broussard, and our encourager, Danny Sneed. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where